Hello! Sorry about yesterday, I failed to make a video, so there will be two today. Anyways, today we'll talk about morality and decision making. Basically, how much should your morals weigh into decisions one makes, especially on the scale of a state? Let's take an obvious example. Murder. Now, is murder beneficial? Murder. That's murder. Is murder beneficial? To whom? No one, actually. It's beneficial to no one. See, everyone loses with murder. Don't believe me? Let's run through the list. The state. What does it lose? A taxpayer. Maybe it's a kid, so you don't have them paying taxes yet, but in such an instance, that's still a future taxpayer that's lost. What about the person being murdered? Well, the victim, obviously, they're dead. The murderer? Well, they're either gonna die. No, Gary, no. You deserved it. Or they're gonna forever be ruined. Now, depending on who they are, some people will fangirl or fanboy over them. I still do not understand why people do that. But there are people who do that. To which I say, either you're crazy, stupid, dumb, or both. Actually, all three. I'm leaning towards all three. But ignoring the suicidal, there's another group who loses in this. Society. Everyone outside of the initial incident alongside the state has to suffer fear, panic, and a feeling that they lack security. Think about it. When we hear about a school shooting, regardless of how bad it is, it could be a Columbine, could be some idiot popping a shell off into the freaking road because he decided, this looks like a duck. Could be either. If you are anywhere around that, or you hear of that and you hear school shooting, is your immediate worry gonna go up? Yes. Are you gonna fear? Yeah. You're gonna worry, panic, and you're not gonna feel as safe as you used to. If the news blotted out all stories of school shootings, let's say they never appeared, gone. They could still happen. Let's say they don't appear on your newsfeed. Sure, that'd be hiding stuff and it wouldn't necessarily be the best, but would you fear as much about school shootings? Likely not, because you don't freaking know about them. Now, there will be those who will be suspicious of a lack of school shootings being reported, especially if it goes from our current amount of reports to 0, but still, the net benefit will occur of how people view things. The fact is, when you learn of something bad happening, your resolve sort of crumbles. It weakens. It's not going to be 100%, but when you learn, oh freak, bad things are happening, generally speaking, your mind's not going to be in the best place. Because you're thinking, wait, this bad thing happened. Could that be me next? Maybe I'm next. Or maybe it's my friends. Or my family. Or anyone else I care about. Maybe it's your dog. Hi, Bailey. But whatever the reason, or whoever you fear for, the fact is, things tend to get bad when people worry. So you can see already why certain things must be enforced, especially when it comes to the law. But what about things that are more gray? Let's take a prisoner. Let's take a petty thief. Maybe he stole an apple. Maybe he stole a cart. Maybe he got bored and decided to steal a wacky waving, arm flailing, inflatable tube man. I hope I pronounced it right. Let's just say he did, and it's counted as petty theft. Is it harmful overall? Yes. The thief, of course, is naturally, encouraged to steal. They have committed a crime and thus are looked down upon. Of course, the victim, they were robbed. And they have less money now. Which is bad when it comes to development and investment. The state also loses because, lower growth. The more the economy is defined by theft, the less it actually grows. Part of what allows growth to occur is this trust that whatever I build, whatever I invest in, whatever I do, it's going to stay there. I don't have to worry about someone taking it from me. It's why, for instance, nationalization efforts tend to result in a mass exodus of foreign capital because no one wants to invest in a place that could steal their stuff at any time. But at the same time, how do we deal with the petty thief? Because, it hurts, but it ain't as much as this, and more than that, he could be reformed. Now, depending on who you are, Christian, Muslim, Jew, atheist, whatever, you may have some religious differences on how you believe things should be approached. Maybe your ideology says things should be approached one way or the other. But regardless, this person, their actions are still a net negative. We cannot let this continue. Even if it's just stealing an apple. The precedent that sets, especially if we allow similar crimes to take place, will not be good for anyone. Not even the thieves who do so. After all, if you hit every neighborhood window with a brick and shatter their glass, is that going to be a good neighborhood for you to live in? No. And so why should that be tolerated? It shouldn't. What a lot of people tend to think of as small things, like it's just some theft, you have insurance for that, it doesn't matter how much is destroyed, is very important because it's a sunk cost. And more importantly, it diverts resources from building up the neighborhood to be even better just to maintain what it used to be. And even then, when the wealth is drained significantly enough, that can't even happen, and you end up in a Rhodesia-like situation where you're living in the ruins of what was once a developed civilization, which is now impoverished and wrecked because people decided to be stupid and do stupid things. Good job, stupid people. Now, admittedly, Rhodesia was not the best country, especially when it came to voting rights, but it was a decent country. Certainly wasn't apartheid levels, and it was bringing everyone up. Then it went to ruins. And that's the thing. We have to remember that even if we think this petty thief, also I think I got it backwards. Let's pretend to say that. Reformation is a very real thing to consider. Because, is this thief's actions bad? Yes. As a matter of fact, they are not beneficial to anyone. But, unlike the murderer, there's a potential for reformation, especially if it's due to poverty. For example, let's say you don't have any good trades, you had to drop out of high school to make sure you could live, just work enough to go by, and you don't have any real trades that you are good at. If you were taught a good trade, or even just a hobby that's somewhat profitable, and were able to make a good enough fortune on that, while being taught financial basics so that you don't spend recklessly, you could not just become a better person and drop thievery, but also you could become a net contributor. And that's the thing. There is a benefit to allowing people to reform. The question is, where do we draw the line? Should this guy be reformed as well, the murderer? Let's say he killed his boss. Should he be able to be reformed? And the answer is simple. At least from what I can understand, they can't be reformed. Once you have taken a life, you have demonstrated that you do not value life. More than that, it's not something that can be justified by, I was worried, I didn't have any other option. When it's murder, you had other options, and yet you chose, well, murder. For example, if you're worried about someone, say, hurting you, there's the option of going to safety. If you're worried about someone you know getting hurt, you can always report it to the police or get a gun. Defend them yourself. There are options. However, murdering someone is an option that is destructive to everyone. No one wins. Not a single person. Now, you could say they lose less than other options, and that's potentially true. I won't deny that. But we cannot deny that everyone loses with murder, and it is a very serious thing to do. So you can't really reform from that, and so the best option is, well, save the effort. Once they're proven guilty, bury them. Don't waste your time with lethal injection. Just get 45 ACP, get a 1911, and solve it yourself. Or more accurately, the state should solve it. Once they're convicted and proven guilty, of course. It's cheap, quick, and so long as people don't draw it out with needless legal battles, it shouldn't cost too much. A lot of the reason it costs so much for criminals on death row is because of how long they end up stalled in the legal process. But these two examples demonstrate at least the basic idea behind morals and applying it to decision making. If you consider this morally wrong, then it is right to argue for punishments for it or declare things about it. Same here, same principle. This is bad. Sorry, this is bad. And so, what are the options and do they benefit us? Morality is more than just crime, though. For example, what about charity? Charity helps the poor, makes people feel better, generates stability, and grows trust. It is a net positive all around. It also uses its resources far more effective than a private company or the government ever could. And these are obvious examples of where the moral decision, punishing a murderer, considering reformation of a criminal thief while still acknowledging their wrongdoing or being charitable, benefits people, including the obvious fact that it is moral. But when do morals and decisions conflict? I want you to think about that honestly. When in your life has the right thing to do been the worst option overall in terms of benefit? I'll give you some time. What do you think? One example I can come up with is war. Death is bad. That shouldn't be a controversial statement. Unless it's done to bad people, generally speaking, I think we can agree death is bad. And even those who believe that bad people dying isn't good, they still generally hold that death is overall bad. They don't flip it. They wouldn't say, oh yes, death is generally good, but for murderers it's bad. No, they just flatten it out and say all death is bad. But war consolidates resources, decreases opportunity, can enforce liberty, and can end tyranny. However, that death is bad thing doesn't just go away when war is declared. It's still there. And so war is understandably considered a morally wrong thing to do. But if a war, for example, allows for the freedom of a people, their ability to live the next day, the ability for them to get a job and grow as people, and the removal of a dictator oppressing them, well, then that's a net positive. It's beneficial for everyone but the people getting cooed. And so, naturally, should we do it? The raw numbers would say yes. Sometimes war is by the numbers the best thing to do, because oftentimes you can't negotiate with evil people, with terrorists, those who would bleed on others' blood for a pet cause that is in truth oppression, do not have the moral high ground, but more importantly, to overthrow them is a blessing to those who are under them. And yet, the cost of blood is still there. You cannot deny that lives will be lost in it. Were lives lost in Afghanistan? Yes. Plenty of them. Were they that much relative to our previous wars? No, not really, but a lot of people were injured, a lot of people suffered, and it wasn't a fun time. It was bloody, man, it was rough. But the U.S. did some very real good for the Afghans. It may not sound like it, but think about it. A regime that doesn't force their women to be subservient to their husbands. A regime that tried to grow their economies and develop them past the opium trade. A regime that wanted them to be, democratic, to have a say in who ruled them. Now, for most people who are liberals, that sounds like a good thing. Even I say it was relatively good. I don't really care so much about the democracy bit, but it helped people. And yet, people shunned it and eventually wanted it to cease because they thought it was a waste of time. And so what ended up happening? They got reconquered by the Taliban, their women are no more oppressed, their economy ain't growing that much, and frankly, they're not doing too well. They're trying to encourage tourism from what I've heard, but why would you go to the place where the people blew up the Bamyan Buddhas, other than to see the corpses of the Bamyan Buddhas? It's like going to a terrorist state. It's stupid. The fact is, sometimes a decision is not necessarily always a moral thing. Now one may say, well, maybe our morality should adapt to that. But here's the thing. Consequentialism is not a good mindset to have. Now, are there perks to thinking about things only in terms of consequences? Yes, in fact, I would argue it's very good for someone trying to set the board. Basically, clear out the riffraff and ensure that the new society can develop on the best of terms. But it's not good when you realize that trust is needed in the society. So beyond the initial phase of clearing the board, consequentialism has no place. Because if you just think about consequences, people are going to start worrying. What if the loss of my life will result in better consequences? Well, that's not good. And if the state thinks that it is the case, then I could be dead. Not to mention, any state which can justify things by saying it's for the greater good naturally has a tendency towards tyranny. You need a solid moral framework outside of consequence in order to justify many things, especially long term when you're not just dealing with despots. And so naturally, consequentialism is basically just good for an old guard, those who come in first to establish a new system. Past that, it's not really good for much. It has its place, as stated, but it's not good beyond that. And so sometimes you have to weigh these options. Now, personally, I would sooner have myself take all the moral responsibility for cruelty if it means that people live better lives. But some people don't want to make that choice and would rather just be moral. There's a benefit and merit to both, so I'll let people choose on their own on this one. So make up your own mind. Would you rather be moral or efficient? Because sometimes you can't be both. Strive for both, sure, but what are you going to pick when you have to choose between the two? I leave that up to you. Have a good one. Goodbye.